All right, well, my editing skills are crap as usual, but can the same thing be said about Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials? Stick around and find out. All right. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from ChristianGeekCentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions here with an uncut review of Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials. Now, I haven't read any of these books, but I did see the first movie and I enjoyed it, so I was looking forward to this next one. Let me tell you just a little bit about it. Basically, if you've seen the first one, they were running around in this maze, waking up with amnesia, these kind of young adult, kind of kid, late teen, mid-teen kind of kids, and they don't know why they're there. They've lost their memory and stuff like that. Well, eventually they kind of, I don't want to spoil that movie, but I did do a review on it, so if you check around, snoop around on this channel, then you can find that one. But anyway, they get their way out of the maze, the survivors of the first movie, and they start gaining some of their memory back and learning a little bit about why they were there, but still the details are very foggy. Now they are free of that, and they are seeking shelter with this other group that, you know, it's like, hey, come with us. We're against those people that put you in the maze. But yet there's something shady going on with them that they can't quite figure out, and pretty soon, you know, it's got runner in the title, so they're on the run again before long. So this movie basically is like a middle chapter in maybe a trilogy, a quadrilogy. I don't know how many books there are or how many movies there are going to be, but it definitely feels like that kind of middle chapter with a lot of the pitfalls that come with that. You know, there's very little new info given regarding the overarching plot of the entire series, and what info is provided is given in like these little quick spurts and separated by numerous scenes that don't advance the overall plot of the series. And so you know, it didn't have the same kind of pace. The first movie had this great sense, I thought, of tension as things were slowly revealed, especially regarding the threat that they were facing. In this one, it's just a different kind of movie. It doesn't have that kind of slow reveal of the threat. It's more of like a very, very, very slow reveal of what's going on, you know. But keeping the audience and the characters in the dark doesn't add to the tension like it did in the first movie. So it just ends up feeling a bit slow at times. So yeah, it's slower and less tense. It lacks the fear of the unknown that was a big part, I thought, of the first movie, and that's basically replaced by zombie type creatures and cheap jump scares. There is a little bit of fear of the unknown as they kind of have these zombies chasing them in the dark and stuff like that, but still, I think a lot of times they're relying on these jump scares and like, hey, that zombie totally should have not been waiting until that moment to suddenly jump. They were in the room, they were making noise, that zombie should have jumped at him, but no, they wait until a moment that is convenient for the scene that they are trying to set up to have the zombie suddenly jump from out of nowhere, you know. So I think kind of like the ninja zombies that a friend of mine talked about in one of the recent seasons of Walking Dead. The dialogue and the story points feel copied and pasted from a large collection of movie scripts, you know. I couldn't point to like, oh, this movie says this line and this movie says this line, but as you're watching this, it just kind of feels like I've heard all these lines of dialogue before, like many, many times, and it's like someone like a kidnapper that's cutting up newspaper clippings to paste together a message. It's like they did that with scripts throughout the history of Hollywood, and they pasted together all the dialogue and some of the major like kind of plot points for this one. So it just kind of felt very familiar. The characters also had very little to differentiate them from each other. They all kind of were motivated by the same thing. It's like, we want to live, we want to survive, we want safety, you know. But as far as their individual personalities, they weren't standing out from each other, and so it was difficult to kind of, I guess, care about anybody because you didn't really understand what made them tick, what they cared about the most, and what it would mean to them if they didn't get that, you know. The fact that they were all kind of running to survive and stuff like that, I mean, that's not something that we can really relate to. And I think if they were really in this situation, then their emotions would be much more heavy and dark and extreme. But it's not that kind of movie. It's based on a young adult property. It's aimed at probably largely the same audience, although I do think there's a good amount of crossover for people that aren't into young adult novels. So the cast in this movie was the returning cast from the first film with a few other new characters added to the mix. The performances were all solid, but they had little to work with in the script, I felt. At this point, I think all these actors are probably being underused, because they would have these little moments like, oh man, that actor's emotional access in this scene is really good, and I'm really just kind of buying into this moment. But in the context of the story, the characters are still kind of making choices that don't make a ton of sense, or that they don't seem properly motivated. They're just not very complex. So, that was a little bit of a bummer there. There are some really cool and creepy monsters / zombie designs. They're not technically zombies, but I mean, they have a lot in common with zombies, so I'm just going to call them zombies. But they're a little bit modified in terms of what they look like from normal zombies. There's not really blood involved. It's a PG-13 movie, but they got black crud coming out of their eye sockets and their mouths and stuff like that, so it's just different enough from traditional zombies to be like, ooh, this is weird, this is creepy, and then later on, as you see kind of what happens when these zombies kind of fully evolve into their full-on diseased zombie form, it's a visual concept that I'm like, that is jacked up, so I really enjoyed that. I was really creeped out by that. But by the time they get to that point, they're using full CG to represent these creatures. And so the last major kind of zombie action sequence uses full CG zombies chasing the actors, and that took me completely out of the reality of the moment, and constantly was sucking the tension out of those scenes, which is a real bummer for me. That might not be a problem for a lot of people. I'm just cursed with an eye that picks out CGI really easily, especially when it's in motion and it's supposed to be imitating something biological as opposed to like machine type stuff, which is what they had a lot more of in the first movie. So anyway, is there anything of like particular philosophical or moral relevance in this movie that's being touched on or treated in such a way that it's going to stimulate thought or conversation potentially? I don't think so, at least not intentionally. There's probably very little intended in terms of moral, philosophical themes. But my mind went to the idea of submission. This story and many other young adult stories share a common thread of not trusting authority figures. And that, I think that's appropriate. We should always look at our authority figures and say, I'm not sure if I can trust this person, and constantly be discerning that, I don't think we want to get into the place where we're like, oh, this politician will surely save us, because they're not going to do it. But they go to the point of actually rebelling instead of submitting against authority, and submitting to authority. Excuse me. And I think that that's something that we ought to be on guard against, is being really quick to rebel against authority. It's one thing to question authority. It's one thing to not trust authority necessarily. But I think there are many authority forms that much of the time, in fact the majority of the time, we should be at least submitting to and even trusting. As a believer, disobeying authority is appropriate when that authority commands an action that would be sin. Okay, that's when it's appropriate to rebel, disobey authority. But in all other cases, we are actually to submit to our governing authorities. We might not like them, we might not trust them all the time, but if they're not commanding us to sin, we are to submit to our authorities and to each other. And we see that in Romans chapter 13 and also in Ephesians chapter 5. But big Hollywood movies, they don't make movies about submitting to our employers and submitting to the speed limit and submitting to copyright law and submitting to our spouses, because who likes to think about doing any of that? We want to do what we want to do, and when we focus on the flaws in people or laws that are in authority over us, then it helps us feel kind of justified in rebelling against them. So we like stories about corrupt leadership, because then we can go to our job or to our home and say, yeah, I'm being mistreated, blah, 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 blah. I should, just rebel against the way my boss wants me to stack these things on the retail shelf. I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, blah, 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 or whatever. But those of us who believe in the Bible shouldn't be looking for reasons to rebel or to defy. We should be looking to submit as much as possible, provided it does not cause us to sin in any way. Okay, so in summary, if I were a time traveler and I were to go back in time and talk to myself, I'd say, Peter, hey, skip this one. Skip it until you've watched the trailer for the third movie in this series. If the third movie looks good based on the trailer, then watch this one to catch up so you can be in the know for that third movie. But otherwise, It's not worth it. It's rated PG-13 for extended sequences of violence and action, some thematic elements, substance use, and language. You know, I haven't been using my my scoring system for a little while. I wanted to see if anybody would notice. Nobody brought anything up to me except for one person that I happened to bring up and mention that I'm not using the review system anymore. So let me know if you want these numbers. Some people like numbers, but I've kind of ditched them because I don't like to have to like justify and you know, in this quantifiable way, you know, why I give this a number value and something like that. They're just kind of like, this is not a mathematical process for me. It's just kind of like what I'm feeling, you know. So when you're talking about what you're feeling and then trying to put a number to that, you know, it's really kind of weird. But anyway, if I were to try and score this, I'd give it a quality score of 7.5 out of 10. That's like a C letter grade. And if I were to give it a relevant score, I'd give it a 6.0 out of 10, which is like a D. All right, so those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below or at ChristianGeekCentral.com. Also, check out the Extra Life video on this channel if you haven't, that I just put up earlier this week. I'd love to have you involved with what we're going to be doing with that in the next couple of months. Then please like, share, and subscribe if you like this video and want to share it and want to subscribe. That really helps me out and helps the channel out. You can also support this channel by visiting SpiritBlade.com and checking out what we have for you there. And then please visit ChristianGeekCentral.com for a ton more content and community that you're not going to find on this channel. I hope you join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Where's the button?